Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Today I want to talk to you about the string of pearls houseplant. Now a lot of you will be watching this video because you're probably tearing your hair out saying, why do I always kill my string of pearls? Well, firstly, it's not just you. It's a really tricky plant to look after and to get thriving very well. I think if you are a houseplant collector, owner, enthusiast, parent, whatever you want to call yourself, you've probably had one of these before and you've probably killed at least one, if not several. They're just quite tricky. They need a very specific set of requirements, and unless you get all of those ducks in a row, quite often they'll just keel over and die. So in this video, I want to go through each of those requirements. And let me tell you, it's not that difficult, but you do have to get all those ones spot on. So if you tick all these boxes, you will have a strong and healthy string of pearls houseplant. So keep watching and we'll go through them right now. So this is an example of a string of pearls that has been malingering and struggling for quite some time. When I received this one, the soil was absolutely sopping wet. I mean, soaking. It was almost like a bog. And to be honest with you, if I just left it the way it was, it would have lasted probably about a week and then died. And I think a lot of these string of pearls, when they come from the nursery, garden centre, houseplant store, if they're not being cared for by people with experience, then you're off to a really bad start straight away. Let me just put this down. Because quite often the soil type is wrong, and that's the first thing you want to check for when looking after the plant, is the soil type. They really don't like heavy, water retentive soil. They're a succulent, and they have quite sensitive, not very deep and very sensitive roots to too much water. So if there's anywhere near like too much water hanging around for too long, the roots will rot and the plant will die. And that is remarkably easy for these guys. So you can overwater them. That's probably the key reason for most of the time, is they rot and then they die. And they're quite sensitive to that. So if you already have one, check your soil type. What you need is a light, free draining mix. This has got plenty of perlite in it. It's very light. I can't really show you because it's got string of pearls in it at the moment. But you want something really free draining, like a cactus mix. If you've got a general cactus mix at home, use that, because it will have plenty of vermiculite, really free draining, where air can get to the roots, and that's what you need. If you make it up yourself, just plenty of perlite, vermiculite, and sort of fine particulate gravel. It's going to really help your chances massively. So when you do water, it does make the soil wet, but it doesn't sit there. The water doesn't sit, it drains through, and that's what you want ultimately. So apart from the soil type, free draining mix is important. So if you have one, if you've just got one from the store and it's staying wet for days and days and days, I mean proper wet as in you put your finger on the top of the soil and your finger's wet, that's really wet. And if it stays like that for days and days and days, the soil mix is probably too heavy. So you need to very, very carefully take it out of the soil and put it in some new soil. But the roots are small and delicate, so be very careful when doing that, because if you damage the roots, you're going to be in trouble as well. So gently try and take it out. Don't worry about getting all of the soil off, because if you do, you're potentially going to pull the roots off when you do that. But just try and remove as much of the soil as you can. Put it in better soil mix. The easiest thing is just to pick up a cactus soil mix from your garden centre and then put it in there, and then just make sure it doesn't get too wet in the future. So that's soil type. The next thing is lighting. So they do want to have plenty of natural sunlight, but they're not going to appreciate the really scorching hot direct sun. So a lot of people will put them on a a hot south-facing windowsill, they're just going to get scorched. They're going to dry out really quick, but also they're going to get scorched in the sun, and that's a bit too much for them. So they do appreciate a lot of light, more rather than less, but just back it off. If it's a south-facing window, make sure it's out of the direct sun. If the sun comes in, just make sure it's back a bit so it doesn't hit on the plant directly, because that's no good, but it will appreciate a lot of bright natural sunlight if you can get it. That's going to help. Thirdly, obviously watering is very important. It does need regular water. It probably needs more water than a lot of succulents, but once again, if that soil type is right, you can water more often because it will drain through and it will dry out quicker. But the key here is to make sure, test the soil and make sure it's nearly dry before you water it again, because I can't tell you water it once a week, because if you've got a heavier soil and you don't have a particularly hot climate, or it isn't particularly hot at the time, that's not going to dry out in a week, and then you're just putting more water, it'll get too much, the roots will rot and it will die. So you need to just check it, feel the weight of the pot. Is it still heavy or is it much lighter? Because as the water gets used by the plant and the water evaporates from the soil, it will get lighter. So get used to how it feels. Stick your finger down in the soil below the initial surface, a little bit down, maybe about, I don't know, 1/4 inch, something like that, a centimetre, just below there. Is it still damp or moist? If it is, it's still going to be okay. If it's dry in there and the whole soil is dry, then you can water it again. As these little pearls, let me see if I can get that in focus, these little pearls, the individual ones, as they dry out, see if we can focus, as those individual pearls dry out, they'll start to split open, just like a pea or a bean or something. So if you start to see them starting to split open, that's usually what happens as they dry out. And if they look a lot flatter and a lot less bulbous, then that's a sign that it needs watering again. Okay, so as you see it starting to split open, just check the soil. If the soil's dry, water again. Okay, so don't just blindly water once a week, because that might be too little or it might be too much. You have to check what's going on with the soil, because that will tell you. If you keep the roots of this plant in good nick, then the rest of the plant will be okay in general. Now lastly, we come to fertilizing. Now string of pearls, in my opinion, don't need half as much food as a lot of other broadleaf houseplants. Okay, so if you're using a general purpose houseplant fertilizer, then I would advise half strength. So look at the packet and put half as much as it advises to put in there. And then I would say, I don't know, if you're feeding your houseplants once a month generally in the growing season, I would feed your string of pearls once every couple of months is fine. They don't grow as fast or need as much food. So that's what I would advise, half strength, and use it half as often. And that should keep you on the right side of things. But mainly the main issues I tend to find with these is overwatering and incorrect soil type, where it's holding on to too much water. And obviously when you get into the winter, that's more of an issue, because they're going to slow right down. If you live in a climate where it gets cold in the winter, it's going to be hardly growing at all, if at all. And so it's not going to be using that water. You can't keep watering at the same amount. So keep an eye on the soil and decide what you're going to do based on what's happening to your plant. You can't water to a strict schedule, because there are so many governing factors: the amount of humidity, the amount of heat, the amount of light, and all these things. And so it will change throughout the year. So just keep an eye on the plant. And in general, in the winter, if it's getting cold, just throttle right back on the watering, and you won't need half as much water. Just keep an eye on those things. So if you can get all those care ticks lined up, it doesn't have to be a tricky plant to look after. It just is particular with its care. That's all. So if you found this video useful, please give it a thumbs up. It really does make a difference. And subscribe for more of these videos coming up very soon. Bye for now.